Well, that's what happens when you look like one of those little yellow dots.
We open with yet another obvious dream sequence this week because, let's face it, Majrika would never be able to smile like this. And apparently, the thing that was making her smile was a magic sphere tree, which in the witch's world, yeah, I guess that would be the equivalent of a money tree.
Now that I think about it, that was kind of a common trope back in the 90s, wasn't it? Oh, those sweet innocent years when we didn't realize how damaging counterfeiting could be to our economy.
I was just making money. No, what am I saying? Oh, boy.
Anyway, the show proper opened with her still having the exorcism equipment from the last episode, along with a rather blasphemous collection of junk. Seriously, there's just so many different religions here, plus what's with the Takarazuka reject? Of course, the Ojamajo were wondering what the hell she was doing.
Hazuki, I think you need to stop hanging out with Fafnir.
Actually, she was praying that they would all pass their level 3 exams that night, as apparently they were like the SATs of witch exams, with many even turning in their hats after they failed because they were that difficult. This is followed up by Della, whom I don't think we've seen for a while now, coming in with intel that apparently their test has special bonus for passing them.
And then afterwards, I bet a Nigerian prince comes in asking for your bank account number.
Apparently, it was meant to celebrate the Witch's Queen's 100th year of ruling, but as we'd see by the end, it was the equivalent of getting one of the last few slices of cake after it had been out for a day. It also gave us this face for Majrika that will be my nightmares for the next few weeks. Night soon arrived, and they decided to continue this running gag with Pop trying to stay up, and to her credit, she did do something smart and just use magic to create a good cup of joe. I bet it tastes infinitely better than the instant junk. However, being a kid, any kind of coffee probably didn't taste all that good to her.
Well, it helps if you grind your own beans. All hope is lost.
However, rather than just gulping the stuff down, she decided to get some milk to counter the bitterness. And again, to her credit, she decided not to waste her spheres on something that a parent really shouldn't be that against her kid drinking.
Yeah, I gotta agree with Pop here. A little milk isn't gonna cause any problems. I mean, if anything, her coffee is gonna make her... I said too much, didn't I?
Sure enough, she also found the coffee and took it. And even though I think a little sip like this should have kept the Rugrat up, Pop still slept through the Ojamajo's attempts of waking her. Then again, maybe it just made her sleep thrashing even stronger by the looks of it. Thus, the Ojamajo went ahead into the witch's world. They ran into Ompu, who also had taken her test, though in her case.
Is it the same way most kids get into college these days?
According to her, the test wasn't difficult, and the sphere tree seed was indeed real. Thus, Doremi went into the test overly confident, which, as we know by now, is this little witch's kryptonite. To be fair though, the test itself didn't seem all that difficult, as they just had to race through 3 doors within an unspecified time limit, so basically whatever was narratively convenient. They would be restricted to only being able to use 2 spells over the course of the test and would have to go it alone. Though really, in the case of that first rule, it would only really end up affecting one of the Ojamajo. With that, the test began with each of the Ojamajo seemingly being sent to random locations, though as we gathered by the end of this episode, they were all kind of cleverly tailor-made for each of the Ojamajo. For the most part, we'll get to that. Anyway, the episode switched between the point of views of each of the Ojamajo, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll focus on one at a time, starting with Aiko, who, as usual, got the most interesting storyline, with her test sending her to some very surreal MCS locations. Not only did she have to use a lot of her wit to navigate to the exit, but she also had to apply prudency when thinking of using her very limited spell count. As a result, she managed to get through the first door without expending any resources by essentially haggling.
It's amazing how this show talks about economics way better than CNN ever did.
The next door was even easier, as it was just a recreation of the Oz woodsman Aesop, but with doors replacing the axes. And of course, Aiko didn't need any blinged out doors, and not to mention, she'd even throw a door into the water like in the original story.
But don't worry, Aiko, I got you covered.
Sure enough, she gave the honest and really most sensible answer, and learned that the door was actually already in the water, so she used her first spell to fish it out. With that, she reached the area of the final door, which was a desert, complete with somebody dying of thirst. Of course, Aiko wanted to give her some water, but realized that she only had one spell left and didn't know where the door was. Ultimately, though, her sincerity won out in the end, and not too surprisingly, this turned out to be a part of the test.
So, yeah, good stuff that really tested the best aspects of Aiko. Now, if only one of her friends could have gotten that same treatment for her storyline.
In the case of Hazuki, well, I'll admit I got a bit of a chuckle out of her trials and tribulations. It also failed to really inform anything about her character, well, other than the fact that she runs really fast when she's scared.
Honestly, I think I would have liked to seen her crossover with Courage more than Scooby-Doo.
But yeah, while Aiko's test was meant to measure the strength of her character and integrity, Hazuki really wasn't challenged at all. She made her way through the first two doors, mostly because the residents just wanted to get rid of her because she wouldn't stop screaming, and then her final test was just to laugh at this old geezer's bad joke.
The saddest part is that they could have done something interesting with this.
As it turned out, these Edward Munch screamers, another clever art reference, were completely harmless and likely would have helped Hazuki to the door if she had just stopped screaming and listened to them. This was likely the same for these lightbulb fellas in this Salvador Dali world. It could have been a great moment for Hazuki, showing her kindness as she overcame her senseless fears and recognized that just because someone looks scary doesn't mean they're dangerous. But nope, she just screamed like a banshee and ran around randomly before being given a really easy final test, as we do already know she laughs at the Stooges jokes, and thus of course she would find this geezer and probably even Arto funny. In the case of Doremi, it was better than Hazuki, though still not quite as good as Aiko's, though we'll discuss that more at the end. Anyway, her trial was technically the easiest, as each of the doors were right in front of the next one. She technically could have finished her test faster than it takes for a toy protagonist to have a drastic mood swing. However, in all three worlds, there were distractions that, interestingly enough, in the case of the first two, referenced previous episodes, the Witch Frog Village and the Cephalopod couple. Because of them, Doremi was able to show her friendly outgoing nature, but also her lack of foresight and inability to keep her eye on the ball as she had a test to complete. It's an interesting way of showing the best and worst aspects of this character and how they're kind of correlated. In the end though, she did almost complete her test, but was foiled by, of course, her greatest weakness. And while even she could tell it was an obvious trap,
yeah, Doc, could you make one more space at the next meeting? Remember, Doremi, admitting that you have a problem is the first step.
sure enough, not only did she not get any stakes, wasted all of her spheres, but she failed her exam.
I wanted to use a Wawa clip here, but none of them wanted to even dignify this absolute bit of failure.
With that, the episode ended with Hazuki and Aiko at least gained their promotions as well as their seeds, which, as it turned out, would need a couple of centuries to grow. And you know, by that time, the witches will probably just switch over to cryptocurrency anyway.
This was another episode written by Akatsuki Yamatoya, whom, while I'll always praise his comedic writing and stuff like Gintama, I do think it sometimes gets in the way, like with about a third of this episode.
And no, I'm not talking about the Doremi section of this episode. I thought that was actually handled well and does highlight the shortcomings of the character that she needs to overcome. I'm more referring to, unfortunately, Hazuki's test, which was mostly played up for laughs, and not even great laughs, all at the cost of potentially giving her a good character moment, especially compared with Aiko, who once again, I think is getting some favoritism.
I mean, it's still a really fun episode with some amazing art on multiple levels, but just like a certain Ojamajo, I think it needed a little more focus.
For something that took up the cold opener, the Sphere Tree Seed subplot didn't play that much into the episode other than a last minute joke. Thus, I wonder if they could just have removed it and given it a little more focus on Hazuki, because comparing her to how well done Aiko or even Doremi's trials were is like night and day. Aiko got to display all of the best aspects of her character, like her smarts and sincerity, making it really feel like she earned her promotion. On the opposite end, while not quite as fleshed out, but still well told, Doremi did show why she didn't earn her promotion, as while being social and outgoing can be nice, she needed to learn the value of temperance and keeping her desires in check. Thus, you'd almost think Hazuki should be in the same boat as her. I think her trial was meant to teach how not to judge a book by its cover, as the Moon Screamers were just decent folk, but nope, this yellow-bellied witch just screamed and laughed at a bad joke.
Riveting.
As a result, her trial felt just like that, a bad joke. Now, this didn't ruin the episode, as there was still a lot to love here. The worlds they visited were amazingly creative, and showed some good appreciation for classic surrealist art. I wouldn't be at all surprised if some of these backgrounds would later inspire the witch worlds in some other anime. So, overall, while Hazuki definitely got the short end of the stick here, this was still a fun and very visually stimulating episode. Money and spheres might not grow on trees anytime soon, but at least fun like this doesn't cost much.
One last reminder to do check out the latest Toy Trinity video, where we take a look at the top leads of the franchises. I really enjoyed the response this little video essay has garnered, and I do hope that you guys also enjoy at least parts of it. Yeah, I know a lot of people are just watching it for the Precure parts, but I do hope that you can also find some of the other franchises entertaining too. Next up is of course the conclusion to my Gold Princess review, which I'll start to work on this week. Look forward to it, and until then though, farewell for now my friends, and excuse me, I need to really get that.
Here is your 20 pounds of coffee beans.
Yeah, sorry to keep bothering you, Doc, but, yeah, I think you need to make one more space. I might have a caffeine addiction.